Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from beautiful upstate New York, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show, everybody, and welcome to Sleepin' Sunday and special guest interview Sunday. This is the day of the week we bring in somebody we like, somebody we think is cool, somebody we think it has some depth, and they share some info and drop some wisdom nuggets on our head. It's going to be raining nuggets today, Mara. Do you know that? It's a nugget tsunami with Charles Henderson. We don't call him, I don't even know you by that name, sir. Charles Henderson. It's Chaturatma Prabhu. And Chaturatma Prabhu is a well, before we get into you, Chaturatma Prabhu, any announcements we want to make first?
There's my side? No,
not your side, Prabhu. Come on, we got a protocol
The
here.
whole show's for announcements from you.
There's a Bhakti recovery group meeting today at 9:30.
All right, that's good.
There's also, we're off tomorrow, right? We have a day
Yeah.
off tomorrow.
We have a day off tomorrow. You know what that means, Zoomers? That means we're like walking around the streets like zombies. What do we do with our life? Yeah, me and Kaustubha are heading out of town. Mara will be working
Holding
away in the
things down.
kitchen.
Yeah.
In town.
I think that's it. Huh?
Anyway,
That's all the
Chaturatma is.
announcements?
I was saying yesterday how that old Brooklyn temple, Chaturatma, that used to live
That's right.
near and used to run the gift shop. I
Yeah.
used to wander into that place, teenager, and it's like it was big and overwhelming, and everybody's all into their thing. And I would go in there like no one would even notice me. No one would give me the time of day. I was like, "Hello,
was that
potential cult
frustrating?
member, recruit me, please." And
Was
no
that
one would
frustrating for
give-
you, Raghunath?
It was frustrating. Well, it was frustrating. Well, first of all, I didn't know what to do. It's like, imagine if you go to a place and they're like, "Hey, welcome. This is our Sunday gathering. We have a kirtan first." There's like no program. I was just like lost. But you were always the bright face, the smile, the welcome mat. And you just made me feel so welcome and loved there. And I'll remember you forever. And then years later, when Shelter would go on tour, our band, as brahmacharis, you were running the temple in St. Louis. And we'd stop there and he'd give us the run of the place and he'd invite all the fans from the show over. He'd come to the show. He'd distribute prasadam at the show. He had a beautiful restaurant that he ran. He lived with his wife and beautiful children. Children are all grown up now and they're like next generation spiritualists. And you've just lived a very successful Grihastha ashram, always stayed connected. I've always tried to stay connected with you because I find you a personal inspiration. I'd go to you if I have questions. And you help me with deity worship. You're big in my book. I give a big thank you to you on a regular basis in my heart. So welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Very happy to connect with you and all of your listeners.
Maybe I could share just a couple things too. One thing is like Chaturatma Prabhu, he's very like, like effervescent person, you know. He's, and that'll come out, I'm sure, in this interview. You know, he's like fun and always lively. I've never seen him in any other mode at all. And you know, he's kind of also like, he's like our senior to Raghunath and I, right? Like he's like a generation before us. He's like the generation of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. But somehow, like, you know, if you would have given him a microphone, he could have jumped right in one of those hardcore bands and like,
Yeah,
right.
he could have been. He could have been singer of any of those bands.
No question, right? He could have been a great front man. And but you know, there's one statement Srila Prabhupada made once, and I found it very interesting. He said that for a bhakti yogi, right? He said they should know everything about, they should know something about everything and everything about something. And I thought that was very interesting. You know, it's like we should be like broad people. We should be well informed in life. We should take interest, and we should be like sattvic enough that just like, you know, we're picking up on things on all different subjects. But we should also like really hone in and focus on something and make it our field of expertise. You know, like make it something that we go much deeper into than most people will go into, and then it's something that we can share with the world. And I see Chaturatma Prabhu has done that in a couple fields. One is like, as you mentioned, he does like when it comes to puja or like the ritual around bhakti yoga. He's often the person that's called upon to, you know, when there's some important rituals to be done. He's got that nature to do it in a beautiful way and explain it in a beautiful way. And so that's, you know, I've always seen him in that role. But also, and what we wanted to talk about today is he's taken a great interest in his life in studying the histories and the teachings of what we call in Sanskrit the acharyas, the great teachers of the past, that we could say the previous acharyas. In our lineage, in our sampradaya, our lineage of bhakti yoga, it's a history of great saints, great teachers. There's so many of them, and he's taken a great interest in them and their lives and their teachings. And we wanted to ask you today to maybe share with us about some of those great acharyas. Before we get into who we'll talk about, maybe you could just share a bit with us of like how you developed that interest.
It's actually an interesting path, if you will. When I was younger, in my late tweens and early teen years, I don't know exactly how, I developed quite an interest in the Chicago gangsters.
Okay.
And the G-men, Elliot Ness and his crew.
Okay.
And I read endless books on this. I knew the lives and where they were born and what their histories were and how they interacted. Babyface Nelson, Legs Diamond, Pretty Boy Floyd, Elliot Ness, all these different people. I knew all the stuff about them, you know, and it was very intriguing to me.
Al Capone, he was in Chicago.
Al Capone, all of them, the whole gang, yeah.
Whitey, what was his name? Whitey.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit later, but
Okay.
I think that's like Boston, like
Oh yeah, that's
4 or 5 decades later, but okay.
a few generations later, yeah. And then as a few years later than that, I was heavily influenced and heavily involved in classical music. And I started to take a deep interest in the lives of the classical composers.
That was a shift. That's a big shift.
Quite a shift, yeah. Handel's Messiah. Most people aren't aware that Handel's Messiah was motivated by the fact Handel was having an affair, was challenged to a duel by the husband, and when he was shot, the Bible he would keep in his pocket stopped the bullet. That was the motivation for him for a spiritual epiphany, and he wrote Handel's Messiah. Oh. So, you know, different things like that. So
Krishna miracle.
Yeah.
Jesus miracle.
That's a Jesus miracle.
So I really developed that. And then in my early years in Brooklyn, as Raghunath was remembering when I had the store there and all, and I started really diving into the Vaishnava acharyas of our tradition, to the previous teachers that really carried something that brought us to where we are here. And it just snowballed from there. It's been 30 years, and I'm still going with it, always learning something new about them whenever I can. So it's been an interesting path of interest in biographies until I perfected it in my own mind by the spiritual focus of it.
So it was something that you already had an inclination to before you got into bhakti.
Yes.
And you didn't have to give up that inclination. You just reapply that inclination in a bhakti context.
Exactly as Prabhupada has always said, to become Krishna conscious, to follow the path of bhakti, doesn't mean to give something up. It means to put Krishna in that spot, to spiritualize that direction, to refocus it.
That's
So
what
you
Raghunath
You're
did too.
exactly right.
So if you were to study the lives of those murderous people, it leaves you, I mean, I like history too, but it leaves you with these very dark thoughts. And you start to think, you know why? Because I like these murdery podcasts. Have you ever listened to those? I got sucked into those for a short time. Mayor will tell you. And
Especially children that kill is Raghunath's.
Children that kill. That's a real creepy one. But,
Okay.
but anyway, you can get down that murderous rabbit hole, and they dramatize these now. And next thing you know, all I'm thinking about is because it's murderers sometimes are people you don't even realize. And next thing you know, it's like, he's a murderer, she's a murderer. Who's going to murder me? Am I a murderer? Could I ever murder someone? And it's like your mind becomes obsessed with murderous thoughts. And so it's like, okay, I'm not going to do that. So then you shift to music. But the idea is that when you do that same activity towards spiritualists, it becomes deep with all their habits. You know, I was reading the life of Maharaj Jai Singh, the king of Jaipur, and he would only eat prasad or he would fast. He would only bathe in Ganga water or drink Ganga water, or he wouldn't do, that was he just has certain standards. And so when you hear about like great personalities, leaders, heads of states doing things like that, you're like, wow, if he could do it, I got to raise my game a little bit too here, you know? And it's the same exact fascination or obsession with these beings, but in a way that's going to bring you higher, lift you up, and turn us on in a spiritual way.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing, because like you say, by getting into the histories of these, criminals and all, that mindset comes there, and nobody's really interested in it. Nobody benefits from it. But by getting into the histories and the lives of these spiritually focused individuals, you become spiritualized. People are interested in hearing it, and they become spiritualized by hearing it. So it changes the whole focus. You're right.
Well,
Everybody
so
benefits.
Then let's get into that. There's so many acharyas, so many great teachers from the past that we could speak of. I thought let's narrow the field down to a group that's really important to the lineage in which we practice, and they're sometimes referred to as the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. And I'm going to ask you, even you could spend this hour or hour and a half or however long we go just speaking about one of them. You could probably spend like several shows just speaking about one of them, and what to speak of all 6. But let me just give the initial introduction, is that, as we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam every day, we're hearing about how Krishna is that original root of all life, on all planets and all the universes and so on. But that he manifests in different forms at different times in different ways, and we call these avatars. And like, for instance, we've been reading this past week about how Lord Vishnu appears to the 4 Kumars, and the 4 Kumars are praying. So that's Krishna, but in another form is Lord Vishnu. And in the yoga tradition and these ancient texts, is describing how Krishna will appear in so many different ways and so many different times in different categories. There are different categories of avatars. One of the categories is called the Yuga Avatar, which means it's Krishna appearing in a particular era. These are very long eras made up of hundreds of thousands of years, and he shows the dharma for that era, like the spiritual practice for that era. And in this age, it is said that Krishna appeared as Sri Chaitanya. That was the avatar, the Yuga Avatar for this age. And it's really unique because he came not to so much appear like an avatar, but to experience bhakti himself and show us how to practice bhakti. And so the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan are amongst his most important and prominent followers. And they obviously resided in the holy place called Vrindavan. But Chaturatma Prabhu, could you just maybe give us a little context about their contribution and what makes them so important?
One thing that I find that's really essential and brings it a little bit down to our platform is to diverse from these great elevated personalities that we can't possibly hope to follow or be like, and look at their lives and see what about their lives can I actually understand and apply to my life? What was an example they gave? I mean, we all know how they were so austere and lived under a different tree and had no possessions.
Well, we don't all know. That people need to know that too. So
That's a good
go
point.
ahead and share that. Yeah.
But one of the characteristics of the Goswamis is how they had no fixed residence. They would live under a different tree in the holy place every night, and they carried no possessions with them other than just one or two items. So we can't aspire to that. That's something so beyond what we feel that we could do. But if we look at their lives and try and see what example did they set that I can actually embrace and apply to my daily life, it brings them a little bit more into context with us and gives us an ability to appreciate their influence on what we're doing on the path of bhakti.
Nice. Now, Sri Chaitanya separately asked each of them to reside in Vrindavan, correct?
He asked every one of them had an opportunity where they associated with Mahaprabhu or with his immediate followers. And the request he gave to them was to go to Vrindavan, this most holy of places, to write books that would be there for generations such as ourselves nowadays, and to uncover the holy places that we now take for granted when we visit there, but that at the time were, for all purposes, lost to history.
So like for instance, when Raghunath is telling stories on his Sweet Baby Krishna for Patreon, those are all taking places. Those pastimes are taking place in different spots within the larger Vrindavan area, and so they went there to uncover those and help us understand those places.
Right. Those of you that have had the opportunity to visit Vrindavan, maybe going with Raghunath to see these different places, Radhakund and Shamakund, for instance, these two holy lakes, they're large masses of water now. But at the time they were discovered by the Goswamis, they were just small puddles practically, completely lost and forgotten.
Right.
Nobody appreciated the spiritual potency or collective energy that was there spiritually. So this was the task that they were specifically given, because Mahaprabhu, as you mentioned, being an incarnation of Krishna, wanted to have that opportunity that generations such as ourselves would be able to visit these places and benefit from them. That required the Goswamis doing these activities on his behalf.
And could you mention just very briefly something about the literary contribution of the six Goswamis?
The vast field of Shastra, of scripture that we study in our bhakti path comes directly from their writings. Their practical application of the deep philosophy of bhakti to a level that can be understood is there in the books that our Prabhupada has translated and made available to us in English. This is essential, because if there is just a feeling of sentiment, but no philosophical foundation, that can easily be changed or swayed or misguided. But the books give the understanding philosophically to go with the emotional feeling from the heart, so to combine those two to a solid spiritual direction.
And their books were philosophical. They also had like books of like instructions on how to practice, and then also
not only philosophical and not only instructive, but theater.
Yeah,
Swami wrote several plays with the purpose of conveying this message. This wasn't just, a play to be put on Broadway so everybody will have a good time watching it. These were plays that were meant to give a very specific direction according to the topic of that play.
So they were like real Renaissance men in a sense. They were
absolutely.
Yeah. Could you just super quick, like maybe in a super brief way, what I would like to do with this interview is begin to draw out life lessons from their lives and their teachings, but maybe just super briefly mention their names and just like a real quick summary of who they were.
Well, we had Rupa Goswami and Sanantana Goswami. These two were brothers. There was a third brother, Anupam, that did not make it to Vrindavan. He passed away before the two brothers came, and they were the prominent disciples, the main leaders of these six Goswamis, and they were the ones that Mahaprabhu invested the most instructive time with, hours upon days upon days of one-on-one conversations. So they really had a deep foundation for him. The nephew of these two and the son of the third brother, Anupam, was Jiva. And Jiva Goswami was the youngest of them, but the most erudite. The vast literary contribution that Jiva Goswami has made is considered by modern day scholars just to be completely off the charts. Then there's Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who came from a very high elevated South Indian family and also relocated on the instruction of Mahaprabhu to Vrindavan. His only association with Mahaprabhu was when he was only 8 or 9 years old, possibly 10 at the most. And just from that contact, he became so dedicated that when he turned 30, he then went to Vrindavan and stayed with the rest of them. And then you have Raghunath Das and Raghunath Bhatta.
Now, Raghunath Das is Raghu is named after.
My namesake.
Yes. Our Raghunath Das, and then Raghunath Das, Goswami, and then Raghunath Bhatta. Raghunath Bhatta is interesting because he came from a very wealthy family. And he renounced all of that and became one of the greatest renunciates in our entire line. So those 6 personalities, each with their own individual traits and abilities, came together and worked together in Vrindavan to bring about this renaissance, this rebirth of bhakti.
And then I'm sorry, go ahead.
Who coined that phrase, the 6 Goswamis? Because there's a lot of Goswamis around at that time, all working under Chaitanya. And, you know, nowadays we say, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, but at one point, someone must have coined that phrase because it was like a land of Goswamis.
Well, first of all, maybe you could tell us what is a Goswami? And then,
Goswami means one who's in complete control of their senses.
Okay, so like a master, a Bhakti-yogi master in a sense.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that collection of those 6, they weren't the first. There were Goswamis, Lokanath Goswami, Bhugarva Goswami, who came before them. There were many that came after them, as Raghunath says. So there was this particular group that had this connection to Mahaprabhu. I wish I could give a definitive answer to that question, and now I'm going to have to research it and find out who
That's for next time.
Came up with that title.
Someone came up and coined that phrase.
Yeah, I wonder that too, because there are so many other ones too. But
well, we do know it goes back quite a ways because Srinivasacharya wrote that prayer to those 6 Goswamis.
I was just going to say that the Sad Goswami Astaka, right?
Yeah.
The 8 prayers to the 6 Goswamis. That's true.
Right, so it's not a new thing in our generation. This was the foundation.
Maybe that was it. Maybe
that was it.
Maybe it was that song.
Let's speculate.
Well, we know it goes at least back to that song. So, okay, so maybe you could just start to share a bit about, just pick and choose, that you're really cherry picking here. Because again, these are very vast histories of their lives and incredible teachings that they shared. But maybe you could just pick a few that you think would be relevant for our audience to contemplate or hear about.
Looking at the varied nature of the members of the audience here and knowing the broad range of your podcast, we can understand that we're all settled in this world here. We're all settled in our comfortable way of life with our particular trappings, whatever they are, and yet we're still making an effort to follow the path of bhakti. I like to think of Raghunath Bhatta in this particular regards because of the fact that here's an individual, as I say, that came from this wealth beyond what we can imagine.
Is it Raghunath Bhatta or Raghunath Das?
Raghunath Bhatta.
Okay.
His, well, now you've got me.
No, I think Raghunath Das Goswami you're speaking about, whose uncles were the...
Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm
no
confused at you. Raghunath Das Goswami, yeah. And he had 2 uncles that were ministers in the government, tax collectors, and the wealth that they had was just unbelievable. But it was considered to be a prison to him. And he wanted out of that so much. He wanted to free himself from that particular entrappings because he did not find it to be suitable for promoting his mood of bhakti, his mood of devotion. to Mahaprabhu, to Sri Chaitanya. And so he did everything in his ability to escape that. And
As a young man, like
as a young
running
man,
away from home.
run away from home, give up his responsibilities, and even to the point that when he finally did separate himself from these family ties and become completely involved in the association of Mahaprabhu, of Lord Chaitanya, he was still receiving this from his father. His father was sending money and sending servants to him because he didn't want him to be in any type of discomfort. But he would take those and use whatever resources were given to him in the service of Lord Chaitanya. So that he would take the money and arrange for lunch for all the associates of Mahaprabhu. So he would take the servants and have them cook all these meals. And so in this way, whatever wealth he had, whatever connections he had, this allowed him to be able to use that in the service of the goal of bhakti that he was trying to achieve. He didn't let himself get wound up in it, get attached to it. So I always try to think of that as an example for us. You know, we've got our particular, you know, details that keep us where we are and what we're doing. And to avoid becoming attached to all that, to become, you know, focused on using those, but not letting them drag us down is a real life lesson because, you know, that's something we all struggle with.
So true.
Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Gopal Bhatta was, as I mentioned, a very young boy when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and stayed in South India with his family. He stayed in the house of the family for 4 months.
His father and uncle were priests in
Venkateshwar. No, it was Vyankata Bhatt.
Vyankata Bhatt.
Yeah.
Vyankata Bhatt.
At like one of the most ancient and important temples in South India that you can still visit to today. Yeah.
And they were very prominent members of that Brahmin community.
That family, you can still meet the descendants 500 years later now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're still the priests of the temple there.
It's one of my great misfortunes that I haven't made it to South India yet.
Really?
Oh, let's go.
One day.
Let's go. Let's go together.
Go down there and visit the Vyankata Bhatta family.
Yeah.
But his desire after this association with Mahaprabhu was to leave everything and follow him. But he was an only child. And Mahaprabhu gave him a very particular instruction. He said, you stay and you take care of your family. You take care of your aging mother and father. And after they leave this world, then you come to Vrindavan. So this is also a nice example. You know, we have responsibilities in this world. Husband, father, child, parent, whatever. And these obligations sometimes tie us in and we think of them as that. Oh, it's just a burden. I'd like to leave all this and go do something else or, you know, go to Vrindavan or, you know, whatever it is. But here we have in this example of Gopal Bhatta that he stayed and followed that instruction. Mahaprabhu took care of his family until they passed away. And at the age of 30, after that happened, then he went to Vrindavan and stayed there for the next 60 years. So completely dedicated himself in that way.
It is
Simple
interesting.
instruction. Do your duty.
Yeah. Because when we think of the 6 Goswamis, we're thinking of people. It's said that the way they dressed was they just picked up some abandoned piece of cloth and just wrapped it around their waist, and that was it. And as you mentioned, they slept under a different tree every night. They had really no possessions. They were the most renounced in their habits of eating and their habits of sleeping, all these things. So we think like intense renunciation, and maybe that's the goal, and maybe that's exactly what we're meant to be like. But also they're showing they were, you know, different facets of how one can practice bhakti.
And a perfect example of that is Sanantana Goswami.
And please tell us about Sanatana.
Sanantana Goswami was, you know, extremely renounced, like we're just describing, living under a different tree, no possessions, yet he was the most loved by every family in all of Vrindavan. He would go on what's called madhukari. That means like a bee, go to a different flower and collect pollen, So he would go to a different home every day and beg his sustenance. A little chapati, a little vegetable, something simple like that.
In other words, he's just a beggar. He just knocks at your door, and people just get. It means like the bee just takes a little bit from every flower.
Yep.
It's not even you go in there and they set up a big meal for you. People just give you a little something, and you accept it. And the next
you're on your way.
You're on your way.
Not like, okay, I'm here, come in, where's the table? Let's have a 6-course meal. No, just you happen to knock on the door, you get a glass of milk, a little piece of bread, some vegetable, whatever it is like that. Yes.
It is a beautiful concept, right? We don't have that here in the United States, right? But I've seen this.
We have it. We have it.
Do we?
I've been doing that for the last 2 months.
Maybe you do it.
I've been It's a little different. I go around in an F-150. I stop at their door. They invite me in. We have some harikata, and I've got more offers than I can even keep up with.
Okay.
Me and Bhakta Justin, my assistant, have just been meandering around America for the last 2 months.
So you are unique. You are unique. But I've seen this in India. I've seen people knock on the door. Sadhus stand out, and these are very renounced people, and like you knock on a door in America, it's like, who are you? What are you doing here? Right? Like, what's your business here? Well, I'm asking you. Oh, get lost. Like, why do you disturb me?
Or you get met with a gun.
Yeah, you may, depending, where you are. And but there, the idea is like you feel fortunate when that person shows up at your door, and it's like, oh,
Yes.
let me get you something.
The homeowner felt it was a blessing that this sadhu has come and I can give something to assist them in their path.
And then those simple living brahmana sadhus, they would have in this way they could dedicate themselves entirely.
Exactly.
To absorbing their minds and their consciousness in these beautiful instructions, and then share those with the people that they're actually, the people that were giving them something actually felt like they were getting more from.
And that was the important reciprocal point, is that it wasn't just knock on the door, get something to eat and go on. They would then share with them. But Sanatana Goswami's particular expertise was to share with them by connecting with their situation. He became like the elder uncle, inquiring about how the family's doing, how are the children doing in school, has the son gotten married, is the business doing well, things that we would consider to be a mundane topic. Because it was the life of those families he would visit, he would inquire about those things. He would encourage them in their direction. He would talk with them about what's going on. And in this way, put instructions in their guidance, direction on how they can be successful.
Except for one particular family, when he saw them playing with a deity as a friend. And he opened that door and he said, what is going on? What are you doing with this deity? This deity has to be worshipped appropriately, and you're treating it like a doll. You want to share that story?
That is true. That's a whole other story.
The Chobe.
Yes. And where I was going with that, though, was that once Sanatana Goswami did this and endeared himself in this way, everyone in the community felt connected to him, felt he was part of their family. So much so that when he departed this world, when he died, the tradition in India is when the elder member of the family, like the father or the uncle, passes away, all the men shave their head. Mm-hmm. So every family in Vrindavan, when he departed, all the male members shaved their head as if they had lost their father or their uncle. This is how much love Sanatana was by the people. Even though he was incredibly renounced and didn't involve himself in family matters, still, nonetheless, everyone considered him a part of their family.
So like, even in affairs that, like, people might say, why is this sannyasi or this, renunciate speaking to some ordinary people about the marriage of their daughter or things like that? It would seem like those are mundane affairs, right?
But these were the affairs that these people were caught up in.
Yeah. So
he would discuss those and at the same time impart Krishna conscious guidance to them. Impart to them how he will, direct them in their path of bhakti. I got a little sidetracked reading that note somebody just posted that when you and Raghu depart, that they're going to shave their heads.
I said, I just wrote back. I said, your head is already shaved.
Oh, it was that Evan.
But this is a sign of respect. And this type of appreciation for elders is what Sanantana Goswami, really elicited by his relationships.
What could you mention a book or two that Sanantana Goswami wrote? That are important?
Bhagavatam Rita
Yeah, what
is
that?
extremely important that he's written. It's available in 3 volumes. Each one's like 500 pages. It's a massive work, and it's so instructive on practical points of advancing in the path of bhakti. And it's all told through the story of one individual as he himself progresses on his search and advances step by step along the way. It's an amazing book.
And by step, we even mean like step by step through the different planetary systems and into the spiritual realms. And it describes the spiritual realm in detail that you would never find anywhere.
And then the later portion of it goes into the details of the Vrindavan pastimes with Krishna and this individual's involvement in those as he has progressed to that point. Beautiful book, beautiful book. He was a major contributor to the Hari Bhakti Vilas. He and Gopal Bhatta Goswami jointly worked together.
What is the Hari Bhakti Vilas?
The Hari Bhakti Vilas is, you might say, the rule book on how to behave and why. Very practical and instructive details on how to live our life on the path of bhakti. What do we do? What do we not do? Why do we do it? All of these different things, because anybody pursuing the path of bhakti looks at the life of a bhakti-yogi and the life of someone from the street, and there's a clear difference in what they're doing and not doing.
Right.
It's interesting. I have a job out there in the secular world, and in the lunchroom, there's a clear difference between what I'm eating for lunch and what everybody else is eating.
Right.
And it becomes starkly clear when these personalities who were hunters bring in their contribution to the lunchroom. And we'll just leave it at that. We won't muddy the water.
Or just in their conversation, what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah, of course. Their activities, their conversations. So Hari Bhakti Vilas gives a direction how to live a life different from that.
So that's more like a manual.
Yes.
Whereas the Brihad Bhagavatamrita is like a poetic storytelling.
Oh,
but
beautiful.
with philosophy woven through it and theology woven through it.
Beautiful.
And from what I understand, Chaturatma, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's not like they were just making up the rules. These were, they themselves excavated it from the ancient teachings and sort of like made it into I guess
codified it. This is how you. In other words, what is it from the song that you mentioned earlier? Nana Shastra Vichara Naika Nipano. They were drawing from all the shastras, and then saying, here's a path to follow. Like follow like this. Follow these rules for this reason. You could come up with anything, but they kind of created the in a sense showed the path of how to follow it.
And not only from all the ancient shastras, but their direct one-on-one instructions from Chaitanya. These were also a foundation of what they put forward, because he wanted them to put these books, particularly, for instance, the Hari Bhakti Vilas, how and why lead a devotional life. And so a lot of that was in instructions that he gave them directly. And as you say, they mined all that together into the presentations that they gave us. That's why their books are considered to be jewels.
Well, maybe you can share a little bit with us about his brother, the brother of Sanatana, Rupa Goswami.
Rupa Goswami was such an amazing individual. Rupa Goswami really was considered and viewed as the senior of the 6 Goswamis, as their leader, so to speak. And anything that was brought about through their writings or any realizations they had, they would collectively present those to Goswami for his understanding, for his appreciation, for his guidance on it. one particular example that comes to mind is with Gopal Bhatta Goswami, when the deity of Radharaman, the form of Krishna, appeared to him, which is a whole long story. Maybe we'll have time for that, but we'll put that aside for a moment. But when that deity appeared to him, the first person he approached to inform about this was Rupa Goswami, to explain to him, to get his approval and his clarification.
Very interesting, right? Because like we take an interest in bhakti and we see people doing that kind of ritual in that form. We think, hey, maybe I should just go to the store and buy one of those deities myself and set it up and start. But here was this person that was extremely coming from a background that was deeply absorbed in the practice of this kind of puja, and being on an extreme level of renunciation and learned, extremely learned, and the depth of his behavior as a bhakti-yogi was practically unimaginable to us. But still, he went. There was someone in his life that he went to say, am I doing this right?
Yes.
Is this approved by you? Does this have your blessing?
And this is a really important point, because we should never, in our pursuit of bhakti, consider ourselves, I'm there. I've got it. I've made the grade. Now everybody can learn from me. Doesn't matter how advanced we are, how far along in the practice, we always have to have others that we submit ourselves to and that we learn from. And that process of learning is what keeps us humble. And that humility was exemplified in all of the Goswamis very strongly. This was a major quality of theirs.
It's so important, right? Like they were giving such like a lot of their books, some of their books were so esoteric, right? That we don't even read them. They buried them, right?
And not even don't read them. They're not available to us because, as you say, they were buried. This was Jiva Goswami's particular expertise, to look at the writings of Rupa Goswami, to look at the writings of Sanantana Goswami, and separate those highly esoteric writings that they were putting forth from their own internal level, and setting those aside. Okay, these aren't for the rank and file people. Right?
Yeah. There's a samadhi, like a tomb of those books that were just too esoteric. If people will read them, they won't understand them. And you can visit that tomb.
There's actually two places like that.
Are there two?
One is at the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami, and the other is at the Samadhi of Sanatana Goswami, the Bhajan Kutir of Sanatana Goswami.
At the foot of the Madan Mohan temple of his.
Yes.
So like they were offering these most esoteric, deeply realized books that were like realized through their own meditations, through their deep samadhi that they were in.
That's an important point, because they were on a level, as I mentioned earlier, that we can't necessarily imagine ourselves being on. But at the same time, they were able to give a practical understanding for persons like us. And this is what's really important. If our pursuit on the path of bhakti is so highly elevated that nobody can really grasp it or follow it, then it doesn't do the public any good.
You ever wonder this? Okay, for example, there's this samadhi. So let's just call this out right now. There's a samadhi. It means like a tomb of books that were too esoteric for anyone to read. Do you ever wonder, okay, when are we going to open those books? Are we going to just leave them there?
Come on.
Didn't you ever think of that? When are we going to open? Are we ever? Why were they written then? Maybe they're meant for us. Maybe it's like a time capsule when we become evolved enough to open them. Now, what are they going to do there? Who are they going to serve there?
I think if that's your desire, you should check with a senior Vaishnava before you go about that.
I am.
You should check.
I'm doing it right now. Every time I go by that samadhi, I was like, what's in there? What's in there? How are we going to get in there? I want to know. Doesn't that burning desire happen in your heart too when you go by that?
That burning desire is what prompted a very mundane television show a few years ago with Geraldo Rivera, when he opened Al Capone's vault that was discovered. Okay. I don't know if any of you remember that. It was a whole big thing. They found Al Capone's vault and they figured it was going to be filled with, and when they opened it, there was nothing in it. So
Okay.
not in that correlation, but if we opened out those tombs that you're describing with these books, we wouldn't be able to understand it.
We can't, even the ones that are available, you know, like,
Right. Even the ones that we do have, we don't understand.
yeah.
All right, the next pilgrimage I go to, I'm just going to go by those tombs. I'm going to chant there with all the group, and who knows, maybe some Swamiji will come out and say, "You're the one. You're the one who's meant to read these." You never know.
It's a long shot, but okay, it's possible. Who knows?
We'll give you that option. And once you get it open, you can let me know.
But you know what? And I'd imagine as we're speaking, some people are saying, "What was the name of that book?" Like on our chat board and stuff. But really, what Srila Prabhupada did, and he mentioned this specifically, was he took the teachings from the writings of the six Goswamis, and he kind of, in a way that we could understand, he blended those teachings into his books, right? And in a way that we could digest it, and in a way that it could become transformational in our life.
And this is the important thing that shows the continuation of Mahaprabhu's instructions to the six Goswamis and how it is filtered down to Prabhupada. Because the writings were there, the holy places were there, but they weren't visible by the people at large. So he told the Goswamis, you develop that, you make that to where it is presentable. In the same way, we as the Western, people that we were in our youth and the hippie movement in the 60s and 70s, whatever, could not possibly understand Gaudiya Vaishnavism as it was present in Prabhupada's life in India. So he came to the West and took those teachings of the Goswamis and made them applicable to us, presented them in a manner that we can read them and understand them, and even still we struggle with it.
Yeah.
So what to speak of those tombs, Raghunath? I think I'm just going to steer clear of them myself.
I can't even read books nowadays. I can only hear things on audio. So if those secret books come in audio on Audible, then maybe I'll read them.
Maybe there's pictures in them.
Maybe there's lots of pictures. Yeah.
But one of Rupa Goswami's most important books, of course, was the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is kind of a guidebook to understanding the nature of emotion in bhakti. And of course, Srila Prabhupada gave his, in a sense, a summary of that in the book, The Nectar of Devotion, which is a very important book to read if you want to read an important book. I was mentioning to you a story that I think has some interesting lessons, and that was an exchange between Rupa and Jiva.
This is a very wonderful exchange. Rupa Goswami, of course, is, as I mentioned, this topmost personality. Now, the tradition in India at that time was that there were these people called Digvijayas, which basically means that they were public debaters that would travel around the country and debate with different top personalities and then get a certificate from them. I've defeated you.
What an interesting phenomenon, isn't that?
Like we've got sports now.
We've got sports. I took my kids to the races last night, the stock car races.
Really?
And it's a whole thing. It's a whole culture. People waving the flags mean different things. And there are people who dress a certain way and there's certain heroes. But they had debate. Debate was the thing. You got to get your certificate signed.
So they would do these debates. And so this Digvijay, this big personality, he comes to Rupa Goswami and says, okay, I'm in town. I hear you're the top of the heap. You're the man. So I want to debate with you so that I can defeat you and have a certificate of victory. And Rupa Goswami, in his intense humility and in his not wanting to waste his time, said, I'll tell you what, let's just call it even. I'll sign the certificate. You've defeated me here. Now, the Digvijay was so covered by his own arrogance, he couldn't see what was happening. He couldn't appreciate the fact that he had just been out-tricked.
He probably thought, like, he's afraid of me.
Yes, exactly. All right, well, I don't have to do anything much and I get this victory here. So he went around Vrindavan speaking about how I defeated Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami could care less. He's not looking for name, fame, reputation. Yeah, whatever, Digvijay beat me. Okay, big deal. So Jiva was the disciple of Rupa Goswami. And he heard that this Digvijay is talking about how I defeated Rupa Goswami. This was unbearable for him. He couldn't tolerate the fact that this arrogant blowhard, if you will, was going around boasting about how he was better than Rupa Goswami.
Who was so
They said,
dear
well,
to him on the spiritual level.
Yes, yes. So he said, well, you know, excuse me. He said, if you're going to defeat the master, first you have to defeat the disciple. And I'm his disciple. So let's debate. Jiva Goswami defeated him soundly. Because as I mentioned earlier, he's considered by everyone to be the most erudite scholar. So he just completely defeated him in ways that were, let's just say, publicly embarrassing to.
He mopped the floor with him.
Yes, mop the floor with
was
it.
the before the UFC.
Yes,
how they
yes,
would do
yes, yes. So send him, you know, off with its tail. Now, you would think that there would be great appreciation for Jiva saving the name of Rupa Goswami. But Rupa Goswami heard about this and took it from a different angle. He said, I knew what I was doing when I rejected this guy, just gave him this victory flag. It wasn't like, you know, it was an embarrassment for me. I'm unconcerned with that. But you have shown your own arrogance by thinking you had to step in and make a big issue out of this, challenge this guy and defeat him. So this shows to me that you're actually still fighting with your internal arrogance and pride, and you're not qualified to live in Vrindavan. So go.
Oh,
That was
And
harsh.
he banished him.
wow.
Now, here's where the second level or third level, whatever, of this comes out, is that Jiva Goswami could have very easily presented his position to Rupa. You know, I was simply working on your behalf. I didn't want your name to be tarnished. I was simply, you know, doing this to salvage your reputation.
It wasn't for me. It was for
Exactly.
you. Yeah.
Right.
So
But
you're saying it's a
instead-
time when people get chastised when they don't even deserve to get chastised. And instead of like saying, hey, it's not fair, he said something else. Okay, that's where we're at.
Yes. And that something else was, yes, I'm sorry. I take your instruction on my head and I follow it. And he removed himself from Vrindavan. Now,
I heard that he was living.
yeah, he went to a far part of the Jamuna River and lived in a crocodile cave.
Crocodile cave.
What?
He climbed into the hole that in the
Climbed
mud
into
that the
hole, and this
crocodiles.
is where he was living.
He was so
And
like.
With or without the crocodile?
Without the crocodile. They weren't roommates. They had no agreement.
But he was so heartbroken.
Exactly. And he felt so destitute at not pleasing his spiritual teacher and at actually doing something that displeased him. So the local people, they came to know that Jiva Goswami is living in this very difficult situation. He was not eating, you know, maybe every third day he would eat a little something. He was becoming very malnourished. And, you know, so the locals, as I mentioned, Sanantana Goswami was always there and they would always consult with him. They came to Sanatana and said, are you aware of what's going on? So Sanatana went and saw for himself. So this is where the kind of brotherly relationship between Rupa and Sanatana manifests itself. Sanatana approaches Rupa Goswami and he says to him, I'm a little concerned. Oh, what are you concerned about? You're not following the instructions of our Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, Rupa became very much, wait a minute, you know, my equal senior here is telling me I'm doing something wrong. What is it, please?
It's not like,
Instruct me, enlighten
who
me.
are you telling me I'm doing something wrong? I'm not doing anything wrong.
Exactly. He didn't take it here again, that humble mood of, yes, please correct me. What is it? And he said, Mahaprabhu instructed us to be Jiva Doya. Kind, Doya means merciful, kind to the Jivas, to the living entities. Only in this case, Sanatan made the word Jiva to mean
So
Jiva
it had
Goswami.
a double meaning there.
Yeah, exactly.
Jivas in general, but
Jivas
specifically.
in general, but your Jiva, your disciple in particular.
Right.
And Rupa Goswami, being a very thoughtful and intelligent person, understood the message of Sanatan, and he went and brought Jiva back.
I guess that was a gentle, clever way of saying what needed to be said.
Yes.
So he didn't
Not
even
a
have to say that much.
challenging way.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing arrogant or pushy or chastising, but in a very double meaning way that an intelligent person would understand the subtleties of.
Maybe
And
even
this is
that
back to
way
your
makes
point,
it easier to
Raghunath, that
accept.
back in those times, debate was the way this was done. It wasn't a heavy one-on-one challenge, but it was all about a topic of how to present something humbly so somebody would appreciate it without their false ego getting in the way.
You know, I think to me, this story is so relevant to the current situation we're living in the world, right? Where it's like there's constant, intense debate. It's not even debate to get to the truth necessarily. It's just like battle. We're politically we're battling, and on so many socially we're battling. With social media and television and all the different medias that are out there, they're just, even like when people are talking, like when we were kids, you know, there'd be like like sports shows, and it was just like kind of dignified people like talking about sports. Now it's people yelling at each other about sports. No, you're a fool. You don't understand. And what that athlete did, he's like a complete idiot. And, you know, it's this constant battle. And for Rupa Goswami to say, because you were interested in debating these issues that aren't important, your consciousness isn't you're not qualified to enter into Vrindavan, which is the place where we come to meditate on Krishna, right? The place where we come to reconnect with reality. Yeah, it's just like that's intolerable and it's not allowed in this realm. So until you rectify that, leave. I think it's just so. It's something that we can, if we want to practice bhakti, we can all really try to take this to heart and try to understand what it means.
That's such an important point, Prabhu, because this mood is a symptom of the times we live in. Debate simply for the sake of arguing with no goal, no particular conclusion, just to continue arguing. I mean, you can go on the internet, whatever platform you want to go to, and endless paragraphs of argument to and from different people, not a particular goal or anything, just to run on and on and on. You know, you can always tell those types of posts because they go on for about 10 or 12 pages.
Look out, right? Prabhu, you've shared so much.
By the time you get to the second page, you drop it and go somewhere else.
Right. You've shared so much with us, although in one sense, you're just scraping the very surface. But since you know time is running out, I was wondering, maybe we're talking about the 6 Goswamis who are all men, but maybe we could hear just briefly about one or two of the great acharyas that were ladies.
Oh boy, this is a particular fond subject of mine because there is this idea that only the men are the gurus and only the men are the acharyas and all, but this is so far from the truth. Just without any effort, I can name 10 or 12 initiating gurus that were ladies. This wasn't something that was exclusive to being a man. You know, this was the qualification of one's spiritual level, not their physical body. And 2 of the most important personalities that I always think of in this regards, one of them is Janava Mata, who was the wife of Lord Nityananda. When Lord Nityananda departed this world, she took over the head of the entire Gaudiya Vaishnava community. She was respected by every single senior and junior devotee as the leader, to know that she was in charge. She was the one guiding everyone. And she did it in such a loving, motherly fashion that only a woman has that ability to do, you know? And everyone was, I mean, she had so many adopted children, if you will, that she brought under her wing and guided in their path of bhakti.
And some of those are the greatest scholars and saints of our tradition.
Absolutely. And people that she instructed and saved, all with the greatest of humility herself. when she came to the famous festival, the very first Gaur Purnima, when she came to that famous festival that was arranged by Narottam Das Thakur, she was received with such pomp and circumstance, and yet so humbly took a role that when the feast was served at the end of this big 3-day festival, not only did she personally oversee all the cooking, because she was an amazing cook as well, this was one of her particular skills, but she personally oversaw the serving of this to everyone. And then when they wanted to serve her, she refused and insisted that she serve all of the senior men that had assisted in this. And then at the end of that, she sat down and ate. So such humility was there at the same time while having such an important and prominent position. While she was leading the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, this is particularly in Bengal, the western part of India, she wrote to the Goswamis in Vrindavan and said, Vrindavan is the heart of all of these books you're producing. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brihat Bhagavatamrita, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Bhagavad Bhagavatam, all of these books were coming out. And up here in Bengal, we don't have any of this. So she beseeched them, instructed them, if you will, make copies and send us those books. So in this way, she's instrumental in the spreading of the books through the process of printing and Sankirtan, if you will, having them brought to another location and given to people that didn't have them. Such an important personality.
Hard to believe, you know, you don't have a book, so you have to copy it by hand.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, we go on our computer, we hit a button, and boom, we get the entire file downloaded in seconds.
Send me the PDF.
Yeah.
Not only that, I was thinking about cooking these huge feasts for the Gaur Purnima Festival. Mara, there was no commercial kitchen. There was no gas, right? You got the everything's done on wood in these giant woks. It's a whole different experience. Catering, how much did you cater yesterday for that wedding? How many people?
It wasn't a wedding, but we had like 6 different events.
6 different
But the biggest one was only,
what was the biggest one?
it was only 65 people.
65, that's nothing. We're talking hundreds of people, Mara. Hundreds of people. You're cooking
Thousands.
on wood with like an oar. And that's your spatula. No trophy kitchens. It's simple world. Oh, we've got it so good.
Expertly arranged everyone knowing what they had to do and how to do it. You know, and everyone was so happy to work with her. So Janava Mata is one wonderful example of that. Second example I always think of is Gangamata Goswamini. Gangamata Goswamini's previous name was Sachi. And she was a princess.
That's
born into a royal family. And, you know, as the princess, not only was she a princess, but she was the only child. So king and queen, vast wealth, only child, she had everything at her disposal. And the times of history being what they were, mother and father wanted to arrange for her marriage.
Yep.
So she informed them, I'll marry someone on one condition. Okay, so now she's agreed to get married. What's the condition?
Okay, hold it. Now this could be really important for Raghunath's Arranged Marriage Tuesdays, right?
Yeah. We have a special.
Okay.
Okay, so what is that condition?
She said, here's the condition, that the man I marry is not impacted by birth and death.
Oh, that's going to kill the whole Arranged Marriage Tuesday. It's going to be hard. So she would only marry. Of course,
this means, as she said, I've already given my heart to Krishna. Krishna is the only one that is not impacted by birth and death. So mother and father realized, all right, this is it. They just gave up their bodies. They left.
Wow.
So then Sachi inherits the responsibility of the entire kingdom.
Where was this kingdom?
This is in Puri, in Orissa. I'm sorry, in Orissa.
In Orissa, okay.
So the amazing thing is that she now has the opportunity of this great wealth and this leadership and responsibility. And what does she do? She puts different people in charge that she trusts. and then goes on pilgrimage to all the different holy places throughout the kingdom. So completely detached from the beginning. And then eventually, through the long course of her story and history, she ends up in Jagannath Puri and is personally brought by Lord Jagannath and Mother Ganga in the dark of night into the inner sanctum of the temple.
What? Lord Jagannath?
Raghunath,
Lord
take a picture.
Jagannath. Lord Jagannath wanted to have her darshan, wanted to see her, and in a very mystical way, which maybe we'll have another opportunity in the future to tell her whole life story, but brought her into where when the pujaris, the temple priests, came in the morning and unlocked the doors, there she was in the inner sanctum. They accused her of being a thief who had hidden in order to steal the valuables of Lord Jagannath, and they threw her into prison. Not once did she complain. Not once did she argue against. As we were talking with Jiva Goswami, just that mood of humility. Okay, this is what's coming to me. I accept it. However, Lord Jagannath was not very happy about this arrangement.
Okay.
He instead came to the king in a dream and said, if you do not go and release Sachi from your prison cells, I will take away everything from you. He said, not only go to the prison cell and release her, but you and all of your ministers and all of your priests, you go and you become her disciples. So this idea that, oh, she's a woman, she can't have disciples, she can't. No, Jagannath directly instructed that you, the king, all of your ministers and all of your priests, all men, you go and you become her disciple. And very happily they did, and very happily she accepted them and instructed them throughout her entire life.
Wow.
Krishna always works things out in the end, doesn't he?
He always works things out in the end. Yeah, we just have to have that faith.
Thank you so much for sharing what you've shared with us, Chaturatma Prabhu. You know, you share the stories of these acharyas online, right?
I have a YouTube channel,
YouTube
Chaturatma
channel.
Das, and then I have a website, chaturatmadas.com.
Can you
And
spell
on
that for
both-
everyone?
What's that?
Could you spell that so people, so listeners can find it?
Sure. Wow, somebody's got it down there already. That's Raghu. Yeah.
But that's just for a few people can see that.
Oh,
Most
okay.
listeners won't see that.
CHATURAMAATMA. I'm sorry, can't even spell my own name.
Chaturanga, Chatur, Atma, like an Atma.
Yes, yes.
Das.
CHATURATMA.
TMA. DAS, DASA.com.
DASA. Sorry,
Dasa.
I clicked
Okay.
SA, yeah.
Dasa.com.
Or just to my YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel has all the videos that we've produced on the multitude of acharyas that are available to us to speak about.
They're great stories, and there's so many important bhakti yoga instructions found through them.
Great information,
you.
great stuff to listen to on our downtime. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So happy to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about these wonderful personalities who really add a lot to our lives. And we just have to figure the connection.
Now we have a special thing at the end here. There you go. He's built
already
for it. We call this
gets
the
it.
dance cam part of the show.
All right.
Yeah, Mara goes around. There we go. Told you he was effervescent.
Effervescent.